So first of all, some of you may already know who I am because you may have taken my classes or you may have seen my YouTube videos. You may have been wanted in some of my most recent classes or, the bundles that we have. But for people who may not know me, who may have just come across me on TikTok, my name is Angela Murray. I am both SHRM Senior Certified and HRCI certified senior level, right? And my whole world, basically, for these last 8-9 years, my whole world has been helping HR professionals pass this exam with as little money as possible and try to keep your sanity at the same time. And that is because I have been right where you are. Right, I was an exam taker. Maybe 9-10 years ago, I was studying for the SHRM exam. It is what got me here. um, so I mean, everyone has felt at some point that they were just being beaten down by this exam, right? And that's kind of, that's why I'm here. Have you ever taken like a practice quiz and every single answer choice felt like it could be the right answer? That is exactly where I was when I first started taking the exam. Everything sounded like it was reasonable to me. Everything sounded like something that I would do in my organization. I was studying these answers and it felt like the test was going to be too easy. And I started thinking, it can't be this easy. It couldn't possibly be, because I started reading Facebook posts. I joined some of those SHRM groups and I started reading posts and people were freaking out. And I was over here like, what is everybody freaking out about? And that's how I knew I was doing something wrong. That's how I knew I was off track, right? But let me just ease your mind. If you are there and you are panicking and you are feeling like you have no idea what you're doing, you are not the only person. I can assure you of that because I get the emails every single day. Everyone has felt just like you at some point, even me. That's how I got here. I took the SHRM exam for the first time 9 or 10 years ago. When I first started studying, it just felt like I was reading all of that information like um, through a drinking straw or something. I just couldn't retain it. But since then, I have taken the SHRM exam 3 times. Right? I take it. This is gonna sound weird, but I take it for fun. Believe it or not, I just enjoy like the testing experience and the environment and all that. But I'm going to tell you something that you probably have not heard from any exam instructor. You probably have not heard this from anybody who has taken the exam
Sorry.
to pass. You can pass the SHRM exam without memorizing everything. You can pass without reading every book. And you can pass even if you haven't studied as much as you think you should have studied. Because what you need to pass is the right skills. It is not a lot of information. The SHRM exam is not just about what you know. It's also about how you think, how you solve problems. And that is not in anything that you are going to read. I want to reiterate that. The way you think through this exam, you cannot read about it. And that's why it feels like when you're taking the practice exams that nothing matches, right? That it feels like um, you didn't study this or you don't recognize these concepts, because the concepts, even though you may have not have studied the specific framework or the specific concept, it is buried within the thinking that SHRM expects you to have. That when the BAS gives you direction about what you're going to be tested on, it can be tested in multiple ways and it may not be a framework that you've read. So it is very important that you think through the exam, not just try to memorize content, right? And that's what we're going to work on. So tonight I'm going to walk you through 4 skills that raise your practice scores. And this is what is going to translate to a pass on exam day if you can implement these 4 skills. These skills are way more valuable to you than anything that you are going to read. There is nothing that you're going to read is going to get you. It'll help you, it'll support you. What you read, what's in the basket and all that content, it is going to support you. And I don't want you to feel like, throw all of that out the window. But what I am saying is content alone is not going to get you there. You cannot work your way, study your way to a pass on this kind of exam. So we're going to talk about eliminating tempting answers. We're going to talk about diagnostic reading. business alignment, and prioritization. And by the time we finish, you're going to understand why you keep getting stuck between those two answers, why those reasonable answers feel like they are the right answer to you. And I'm going to show you how to practice so that you can actually boost your practice scores. And so that should boost your confidence, right? So let's start with a quick reframe of what this exam really is. I've seen too many students in the past come to me all frustrated because they are studying for the SHRM exam like you studied for your final exam when you were in school, right? You trying to read and highlight and memorize, and that's not going to work, okay? I have seen people study for months and then start losing their confidence when they get close to test day, because usually it's because the practice scores don't match, like the study effort that they're putting in. And I've actually had some students to study, then show up on test day. I mean, spend literally hours. I had somebody to study for 9 months at one point, and showed up on the test on the actual exam day and bombed. After 9 months of self-studying and trying to memorize content, she bombed, and then joined my class and we talked through the strategies, right? Because that's what you need, the strategies. Because, like I said, this is not book learning. This is not a memory test. It's a judgment test. This test is asking you, can you see the root cause in the situation? Can you choose a response that protects the business and the people? Can you think like a strategic partner, not just trying to enforce policies? And that is actually good news for you, because you can build skill. We're going to build skill tonight. You can practice skill. You don't have to know every single sentence in a book to have the skill. The problem is most people never shift their studying from content to skills, and that's where everybody gets caught up. So tonight I want you to kind of you out of probably what you're in right now, which is grind time, like study harder mode, right? We love a good grind. I know I do. It kind of like when I'm running around doing stuff, it just makes me feel like I'm being productive, even if I'm not, even if I'm not really doing anything. Like last week, I ran around all day long, and I was so tired at the end of the night. And I told my husband, I was like, I've been running around all day. I am exhausted. And he was like, well, what did you do? What have you been doing? And I couldn't tell him anything. Like, I really hadn't accomplished anything. I was just running around doing stuff. I was just starting stuff. I wasn't really finishing anything. And that's kind of what I see you guys do. A lot of people start doing a lot of stuff before this exam, start buying a lot of stuff, too much stuff, wasting money. It's not necessary. That is not what you need for this exam. This is really the true definition of work smarter, not harder, right? So we're going to shift your thinking. I'm going to start with the skill that creates the most immediate change in your test scores, the one that almost everybody struggles with, and that is eliminating good but wrong answers. How often do you narrow the answers down to like your last two answers and you still end up picking the wrong one? And how consistently do you do that? Probably a lot, because usually when you narrow them down to the last two, it is the good answer and the best answer. And we always end up picking the good answer because the good answer usually is something familiar to us, right? SHRM writes the best wrong answers. They write those answers that sound professional. They sound HR friendly, like what we're used to doing. They sound helpful. Sounding familiar is really what gets you, because if you recognize an answer as something like you might do that at work, it kind of makes the answer feel safe. It kind of makes it stick out to you, right? And it gives you like this false sense of confidence, like it really is the right answer. But these kind of answers are too small. They are too reactive, or you're solving the wrong problem, right? So I want you to think about these wrong answers in categories. Some wrong answers are very emotional. They make somebody feel better in the moment, but they don't fix what matters long term. Then you have some answers that are too narrow. They solve like a piece of the problem, but they don't solve like they don't fix the whole system. Then you have some answers that are reactive, right? Jumping into action before there's any diagnosis, any kind of analysis that's been done, or even just trying to understand the root cause of the problem. And then you have some answers that put HR in a situation where they are hands off, where they are giving somebody else the work, right? HR should be the strategist, especially on this exam. And that is what they're looking for you to show, that you know how to work as a strategist. On paper, all of these answers might sound good, but in real life, these answers are not going to move the organization forward. In business, I'm sorry, on the exam, these are not the answers that are going to move the organization forward. It might sound good, might even be something that you would do at work, but on the SHRM exam, it is not going to work. You have to remember, SHRM is not real life. SHRM has created this perfect world, and they expect you to solve problems in that perfect world. So you have to eliminate any kind of answers that make you think like you have to consider time and resources and all of that, all of those things that we think about on a day-to-day basis, because you do not. In the perfect world that SHRM has created, none of those things matter, right? So I want you to start consistently asking yourself, which of these answers solves the root problem most effectively? Now, somebody is not on mute. Everybody could look down, make sure you're on mute. Here we go. So yeah, start asking yourself which answer choice is going to solve the problem that's presented to you most effectively. And always say root problem, because there is always going to be more than one problem in a question. Those problems are the symptoms of the root problem. Your job is to find the main problem. See, here's the thing about the SHRM exam. They give you those other problems because they want to see if you will try to solve those other problems. And they will write answers that sound like they, would help with that problem, right? But if you're solving the wrong issue, you're going to have the wrong answer. Now, actually, kind of want to talk to you more about that, right? Solving a problem is one thing, because the questions are going to be littered with problems, but solving it effective is another thing. That's what you're trying to do. If you choose the answer that solves the problem easily, you probably that's probably not the right answer, right? You probably just choosing the good answer, but not the best answer. If you choose the answer that solves the problem effectively, you're going to choose the best answer. And often the best answer is the answer that sounds far-fetched, the one that goes the extra mile, the one that does a lot of what we wouldn't think of doing in our organizations. And sometimes that deters us, but I don't want you to let it deter you, right? Effective on the SHRM exam means you are solving for patterns, not just one person. You want the problem, the solve that you apply to go beyond just one person. You're solving for root causes. You're not just looking for symptoms that the root cause causes. You're thinking about the whole system. You're not thinking about just one conversation, and you are not being limited by circumstances. Those circumstances that I gave you, like time or money, or anything inside of the organization that we would normally be constrained by. Because remember, SHRM has created their own perfect world. Things in this SHRM world are you just fine. You have everything you need to solve the problems in front of you. So you don't need to feel like you are bound by anything, right? So I'm going to show you an example of this. I'm going to read the question, and I'll even read the answer choices. And I want you guys to just drop the answer in the chat, and I'll see if I can keep up with a couple of them. All right. So it says several employees have informally mentioned to HR that their department manager often uses sarcasm during team meetings. Some staff feel the comments are belittling, and recent team performance metrics have begun to decline. Although no formal complaints have been filed, what should HR do first? Right? So A says, schedule the manager to attend a communication workshop aimed at developing interpersonal skills. B says, meet with the manager to discuss the feedback and clarify expectations for respectful communication. C says, encourage employees to document their concerns and use the open door policy. D says, review performance trends with the manager and outline expectations for improving team results. All right, so you guys think about that, and which one would you choose if on the exam? Okay, I see some. And as I'm looking at the answers coming in, for some reason they're coming in. Now these answers are coming in slower. What does that tell me? Why are y'all slowing down? Because I can read almost every one of them. Okay, so well, I want to talk through these because this is this is almost exactly what I expected from this. When I was putting this question in here, this is kind of how I expected it to be split. All right, so let's look at our answer choices, because actually when I read through these, all of these sound reasonable, right? None of these are obviously wrong. But if you use our filter and you ask, which one of these solves the problem most effectively? We have to take a closer look, because we actually do have more than one problem in this scenario. We have the declining performance metrics, right? That's a problem. But then we also have this HR manager with his sarcasm and not knowing how to speak to people properly, right? And if you're not careful, which I saw some of you guys do, you are going to get distracted with these performance metrics, right? Reading this question, some people chose D, and I can see why you did. But those metrics are a byproduct of the real problem. They are not the problem. They are being caused by the problem. The real problem is the manager's lack of communication skill, because even the sarcasm that he is displaying, that actually is a byproduct of his lacking communication. So sending that manager to a workshop, that's not going to be targeted enough. I mean, if we send this manager to a workshop and we haven't even discussed with him, like what we think the problem is, how are we going to be, as HR professionals, how are we assured that the workshop is going to cover what the manager is lacking? We can't be assured because we don't even know what he's lacking, right? So there's no possibility that if we don't know what he's lacking, we send him to the workshop, we don't know what the workshop covers, then how do we know we're going to close the gap, right? Does the manager even know what he's lacking? Maybe if we send them to this workshop, they may think this is just a standard like employee development workshop if we haven't spoken to them, right? And then documenting the concern on its own, that is not going to address the problem, right? Even though there is not a formal kind of complaint here, we are on notice, and we do know that the manager is doing something that is affecting the performance of the employees, because as a byproduct, we see the metrics, right? And that threatens the strategy. So no, we're not just going to tell them to document their concerns and leave it at that. That's really the equivalent of doing nothing. And we're definitely not going to do nothing, right? So the obvious answer for this one is B. This is the answer that solves the right problem. It is an effective first step, right? And it is a real solution. It drives us toward a real solution. Meeting with the manager, giving them specific feedback, clear expectations, follow up. That is the only answer that directly addresses the source of the behavior. It also protects the team. It reinforces leadership accountability, right? So even though we have a problem in here, right? We have a problem in here with these performance metrics. These performance metrics, these low performance is being caused by something else. That is the problem that you are trying to solve. You have to find the right problem, right? Okay, all right. So this question, for me, what this question shows you is You actually don't need more content to figure out this answer. You need a way to think. This question, this one here specifically, it comes from consultation, but you don't need to read anything in consultation. You don't need to learn any framework from consultation to figure this answer out. When you start asking the right questions, when you start solving the root problem, then that is when you are going to be able to arrive at the right answer. This is why you can feel like you know HR and still miss questions, right? We all know HR. That's how we got here. But your brain is just not trained yet to see the difference between a good answer and a strategic answer. Just like we just saw. You saw all those answers sounded reasonable. All of those sounded like something you could do at work. D actually even sounds good. It sounds strategic. But only one of the answers, B, that is the only one that actually did the job, right? And so that's why my read method is so effective on the exam. That's why if you read any of the YouTube comments, most people talk about the read method because it gives you a consistent framework that you can rely on to think through these questions. All right, let's everybody make sure that they mute their microphone. Even if you think you're on mute, just look down right now to make sure you're on mute. Because we have one person that is not.
Hey, Angela, I don't know if it's my Wi-Fi, but you're kind of cutting in and out. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing that.
It could be mine because there's so many people on. I probably have a bad connection. But everybody, nobody else is experiencing it though. So not cutting out. So could be your Wi-Fi. Maybe your Wi-Fi.
Angela, would it be possible to use the read on that previous question just so I can see how it's used on that question? I don't know if that's something that anybody else was wondering, but
well, we can go back at the end, but okay. Let me just make sure I stay within this hour in case anybody needs to get off.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about this read method. Inside of my guys, I'm creating this boot camp, and so inside of the boot camp, this is where we use the read method most, right? This is what helps us to slow down long enough to make better decisions, especially when you're stuck between two answers and you're running them through the read framework. It is going to reveal the right choice to you. I am going to go through the read framework like on the surface here, but I'm not going to go in depth because this is something that I teach in depth in my boot camp, and so I don't want to cannibalize, right, for the other people, right? But I do have a boot camp that's coming up on January 2nd. So if you feel like you need more structure in the level of strategy in the boot camp, then it is coming up on January 2nd. But for now, let's talk about the read method. All right, so read stands for role, effect, action, and development. And I'm going to walk you through that. Role is about who you are in this question. So either you are a strategist, you are a leader, or you are a technical expert. Effect reminds you to uncover the root cause so that you can effectively solve the problem. Action is ensuring that the action that you take is proactive and it is not reactive. And development tells you to make sure that the action you take develops the organization long term, not just in the moment, but develops it long term, drives it toward a lasting resolution and not just a surface level resolution, right? So first, determining the right role, it is super important because most people answer SHRM questions like a technical expert because that's what we're used to. And there is a place for that on the exam, but you just have to know when that is. Like if it's not about compliance or it's not about legal, then that is, that's not what you are in that question. SHRM wants to see that, yes, you know the legal side, you know the technical side, but most often the exam is actually looking for you to answer like a strategist or a leader. As a strategist, you connect decisions to the bigger picture, you connect it to data, to risk, to objectives. As a leader, you influence behavior, right? You influence culture or relationships, you gain trust. As a technical expert, this is where you're clarifying rules, or you are clarifying processes, or you are being a policy enforcer, or you are enforcing some kind of compliance. So when you use the READ method, these are the frameworks that you need to run through. All right. So first thing to ask, what role does SHRM want me to play in this question? Do you need to be a strategist? Do you need to be a leader? Or do you need to be a technical expert? It's very important that you don't let the title in the question, or that the person or the HR professional is assigned in the question, don't let that throw you off. The question can name the HR professional as the HR manager and still have them acting as a technical expert. So your job is to decide what role the professional is playing in the question in front of you. Do not compare the title in the scenario to the title at your job. You do not say, at my job, the VP of HR would never do X, Y, and Z, because we're not evaluating your job. We are evaluating the situation in front of us, right? And oftentimes, we don't know. Like I said, SHRM creates a perfect world, and it's not our world, right? So you have to just make sure that you are zeroing in on what is being asked of you in that question, right? And then ask, what answer choice is most effective in solving the root cause? Not the symptoms, but actually the root cause. Because again, as you saw in the last question, there can be symptoms that are a byproduct of the root cause. Then ask, which one of the answers is proactive, right? Which one heads the problem off or thinks toward the future, doesn't wait for HR to react, but actually puts HR in the driver's seat, and we are thinking ahead of the problem. We are thinking both offensively and defensively. And then which answer contributes to developing the people or the processes of the organization, right? So if you run it through this READ framework, it will help you eliminate those tempting answers. READ gives your brain a track, right, that it can run on. It gives us a focus, give us a little bit of tunnel vision, right? Now, I also want you to know that this does not require you to learn more stuff. That is why it's so effective. So you can see here that, you didn't learn a new chapter when we talked about, that question there. You just had to see the question and the answers through a structured lens. This is going to save you some time on the exam, because oftentimes when we get stuck between those last two answers, you don't want to let it go. It's just like a dog with a bone. Like those last two answers, if you can't decide, it just haunts you. And a lot of people just don't want to flag, choose an answer, flag it, and move on. The more you practice with the READ framework, the easier it's going to be for you to use the framework, and you can run the answers through. Like literally, you can run the answers through the READ framework in seconds, right? Once you start practicing to use it, and then you start having more clarity. But this is something that you're going to have to practice so that you can understand. You're going to have to make mistakes, and you're going to have to, maybe, email me and say, hey, how do I run this one through the READ framework? I'm a little confused about this. It doesn't fit, or, show me how it does fit, right? Because this is a muscle memory that you're going to need to build up. Now, I'm going to try to answer your emails as often as I can. I can't answer all of them, but I promise I try to answer as many of them as I possibly can before test day. All right. So again, this is kind of the READ framework. This is kind of like, this is the level of strategy that I teach in the boot camp, right? But we go more in depth because the read framework is more in depth and it takes more practice. But I do teach this in my boot camp. In fact, my boot camp is like we do 30 minutes a day. We work on a strategy and a concept. We do 30 minutes a day for 30 days, and then we connect it with some kind of homework or something. And we just build like that muscle memory and kind of a new way of thinking in the boot camp. And that's what you need to be practicing on, right? You just need to get the skills to practice. All right, let's move on here. We're going to go to skill number 2. This one actually feeds directly into the read framework. Skill 2 is diagnostic reading, right? So most people read questions to respond, but diagnostic reading is reading to understand, right? Here's what I have seen. Here's what usually happens in my students when they come to me. They see something that they recognize or something that they know to be a problem, right? You see something like performance issue, and immediately your brain says, oh, performance issue, I know that's a problem, like we just saw in that last question, right? And that's, usually that is right? So you instantly, you start thinking of something that is going to get performance back on track, like the analytics and all the stuff that we had in answer choice D on that last question. If you see the word, I'm trying to recall that, complaint, right? Your brain jumps into action because that's a problem. If you see something like turnover, your brain is going to say, oh, turnover, we because we all know, even in our day-to-day worlds, turnover is nothing we want to talk about, right? So when you see turnover, your brain jumps into doing something for that turnover. Your brain grabs onto what is familiar, right? And it could be one familiar word, and it tries to solve for that familiar word because it knows that to be a problem. But the problem is your brain solves the problem with your frame of reference. So if your job performance problem, if you're working on your job and y'all have a performance problem, and at your job, y'all would immediately do a performance improvement plan or something like that. That answer, if you see an answer choice with that, that is going to immediately feel right to you. And it is going to give you a false sense of confidence because it is confirmed what you already do. And so that says this has to be the right answer to me, right? But that is not necessarily true. You have to diagnose. You have to slow down long enough to see what's really going on in the question. I want you to write 3 words in your notes right now. Write role, problem, and effect. On your first question, let's see. We have a couple of people who are not on mute. Let's make sure everybody mutes their microphone. I can't find everybody, so everybody look down, make sure you're on mute right now. All right, so again, write down the 3 words, role, problem, and effect. On your first pass through a question, your first goal should be to find these 3 things as you're reading through that question. Who am I in this situation? What is the root problem? Like not the symptoms, but looking past all the noise, like what is the root problem and what would effectively solve that problem? No matter how far-fetched it sounds, no matter how much you wouldn't do it in your organization, no matter how much it costs, no matter, how it doesn't make sense to you, what would effectively solve the problem if you could do anything in the world about it, right? If you have these 3 in mind while you are looking at the answer choices, you'll pick better answers. And I'm going to show you, actually, I believe, I think I have a quick question on that one. So let's talk about that in this question. So this question says, a regional HR manager receives multiple informal comments that a new scheduling system is causing frustration. Some supervisors say they were not consulted before it was rolled out, and employees are complaining about the last-minute changes. Customer satisfaction scores at 2 locations have dropped slightly. What should HR do first? All right. A says remind employees about the importance of following the new scheduling system. B says perform a gap analysis to figure out the cause of the low customer satisfaction scores. C says conduct an assessment with supervisors and employees to gather specific feedback on the pain points. D says work with a training manager to create a refresher course for employees who are struggling with the new system. All right, let's see what you guys come up with. All right. Okay, very good. I see a lot of right answers, maybe just one or two off, but mostly right answers, right? So in this question, if we were to do diagnostic reading, the first thing you're going to ask is, what is my role? I don't see, and actually we're going to run this one through the READ framework. Somebody asked me to do it for the last one, so I could just do it with this one instead. So the first thing you're going to ask, even with our READ framework, what is my role, right? I don't see anything here about compliance or policy enforcement. I don't see anything here about change management. There's nothing here about the culture. So we're not trying to influence any kind of leadership behavior or anything like that. So this one is a strategist, right? Then what is the, we're going E, effective. What is the real problem, right? Underneath the root cause. We have employee frustration, we have low satisfaction scores, but we have to figure out what is causing all of that. These things are just a byproduct of the rollout of this system, right? So when we are being effective, we have to solve for the root cause, not just for these two symptoms down here, right? So how would we effectively solve this system rollout? That's what we're trying to ask. So we already know that the answer choice is going to have to involve something about the system, not about the other problems, because they are byproducts. They are not the root cause. We are on, I think we made it to A, right? So next we need to evaluate for either making sure that this answer is proactive and not reactive, right? So we would have to be down to the last two questions to use or last two answer choices to use the READ framework. So let's see, we're evaluating between B and C. All right, so, well, actually we can't evaluate between B or C because we would have already ruled out B, because it says perform a gap analysis to figure out the cause of the low customer satisfaction scores. So we would have ruled that out in E because it wouldn't be effective in solving the problem because it solves a symptom and not the problem, right? So if we were using the READ framework, we would have already ruled out most of these, and the only thing would actually be left is C. But for the sake of just showing you how it's used, let's just say we're still evaluating. All right, so we have to think about whether or not our action is proactive and not reactive, right? So this one says perform a gap analysis. This is not reactive because we are thinking ahead, right? We're thinking ahead to the future. We're not doing something. We're not taking any kind of action yet. We are performing a gap analysis. We are trying to figure out what kind of action we need to take. So this is proactive. Same thing with this one, conduct an assessment with the supervisors and employees to gather specific feedback on the pain points, right? Again, that is proactive. We are first trying to figure out what we need to do. We don't know yet. So that's what we're doing, the assessment. And then D is to make sure that we develop the organization long-term. Like this is something that is going to go towards solving the issue, developing skill, putting something in place for the long term. If we conduct an assessment with the supervisors and employees to gather specific feedback, then we can decide how we need to what kind of like communication plan we need to roll out for this new system, which is going to develop the organization. We can figure out who is the best person for the rollout. We can figure out like whatever it is that they complain about in C, we can figure it out. We can apply it to the organization. So now when we have to roll out another system, we have a framework. We have something that we can follow. We have a way that we can avoid these kind of bumpy rollouts in the future. So this is going to develop the organization, right? So that C would be a perfect answer for the READ framework. So if you were running your answers, because I feel like most people would get down to B and C. If you were running your answers through the READ framework, B early on would be, you would be able to strike it out, just be left with C. Okay, all right, very good. I feel like this one was a good example. So remember, you want to ask, who am I? What's really happening? How can I fix it for the long term? That's what you're evaluating when you're using the method. All right, so let's go to number 3 here. And I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit. Skill number 3 is business alignment. All right, so on the job, you're used to keeping people calm. You're used to keeping the peace. We're used to like doing the work, keeping things moving. But on the exam, if your answer focuses on people's feelings, but it does not help the business to move forward, then you're going to choose the wrong answer. Business alignment means that your answers have to protect the organization. They have to support the goals and strategies of the organization. They have to reduce risk. They have to strengthen a system or a process. This is extremely important because this lends to being effective for the long term, right? And not just reacting to a situation. And so when you look at answer choices, you need to ask which one of these answers moves the organization forward. Actually, I feel like I want to give you, let me give you kind of like a contrast. So say that you have a question, it is about high turnover. I don't think that's in depth enough. So let's say it's about high turnover and it is it's in a critical job family, right? It's in a job family that supports like a new product launch, right? And you've been working on this new product launch for 10 years. And you have an answer choice like, we have this turnover in this area, and one answer choice says we need to plan a team building because we need to boost morale in that area so we don't keep losing people. You know, then you might have another one that says analyze exit interviews and look at engagement data for that specific job family, right? So planning that team building, that is reactive. It feels good for the moment, but it does not protect the business. It doesn't protect the launch. It doesn't protect the customers. It doesn't protect the revenue. If you are looking at exit interview or using engagement data, then you are targeting the issue, right? You're making sure that you are business aligned. You are influencing the decisions. You are not being reactive. You are gathering information so that you can think long term and cause the impact to the business that underscores business alignment, right? And this is where your 3 roles show up again, right? So if the question is about a big pattern with financial impact, then SHRM is putting you in the situation as a strategist. If it's about culture or change or something like that, again, it's a leader. If it's about compliance, of course, it's going to be a technical expert. But business alignment is about choosing answers that obviously demonstrate you care about the business and you are trying to move the business forward. Right? You have to demonstrate that your first priority is to the business strategy, because everything else is going to follow the business strategy. Like even if the problem is about turnover, if you follow the business strategy, it is going to address turnover, because no business strategy is complete without employees, right? So whatever the business strategy is, that's where you need to be going to. All right, so skill number 4 is prioritization. This one is, in my opinion, I should say, it is simple to understand, but this one is it's hard to perform when you're under time pressure, right? This is just about thinking linear. On the exam, more than one answer can be technically correct, right? That's what we call good answers. The question is not asking you which one is right. The questions on the SHRM exam are asking you what is best, what is most, what is least likely, not what is the right answer. Because sometimes there are 2 or 3 right answers there, but they are always asking you for the best answer, right? Um, when they're thinking best answer, the best answer most of the time on the SHRM exam is what is the next step to solve this problem. Think of these answer choices like a timeline, right? Some answers belong a little bit later. Some are, follow-up steps. Some answers just never belong in that scenario. They sound good, but they just don't match the problem. One answer is the appropriate next move for somebody in the role that the scenario is painting you in, right? In that situation. So when you're stuck between 2 answers, a quick test is to put them in order. Ask yourself, like when you're reading those 2 answer choices, ask yourself, if somebody asked me to do both of these, which one would I do first? The one that you would do first is usually the answer that SHRM wants, like 99.8% of the time, that is the right answer, right? So imagine you have a question where, let's say we've been talking about complaints. Yeah, so let's say there has been a complaint, right? Your employee saying that, hey, we have inconsistent discipline in our department. Our senior leaders, they are just really they don't care about anything, right? And the HR professional in the scenario, of course, since we are offense and defense, we are worried about the legal risk and we're worried about fairness, right? And so let's say one answer choice says we need to give these training managers, or these managers some kind of training on their discipline policy. And then we have another answer that says we need to audit the recent disciplinary action in those departments. Now, if we had those, both of those are good answers. But you do not train people until you know what you are training them on, right? You have to start with the audit. Then you design the training that targets the pattern that you find in the audit. The audit is the first step because it is going to tell you what to train the people on. The training is going to be a later step. Prioritization is choosing the next best step. When you combine this prioritization with diagnostic reading, and then you have business alignment, when you put all of these 4 together, you can look at 4 good answers and you will know immediately which one of those answers belong at the top of the list, right? Because what comes first, what comes next, especially when you're stuck between those 2 answers and you don't have to, it's not so difficult for you to decide that you need to run it through the read framework. You can just say, okay, if I were going to do both of these, which one of these would I do first? I can't give a person a training, right, if I don't know what I'm training them on. All right, so figure out which one comes first and you're going to have your right answer. All right, so let's kind of pull all of this together here. We talked about 4 skills: eliminating those good but wrong answers. We talked diagnostic reading, business alignment, and prioritization. And of course, you have to remember to connect all of this to the read method. Over the next few days, this is what you need to be working on. Every time you do practice questions, don't rush because you have to build up that muscle. Don't just, circle letters if you're not sure about something. Stop, right? Be deliberate. Practice these methods. Build up these skills. Slow down, use the diagnostic reading, notice your role and your effect in the question, line up the answers and choose the best step. Don't just choose any step, like go through and say, if I were going to do something next from here, what would be most logical for me to do? Look for the answer that solves the problem, not the symptom. Start practicing on learning what are symptoms and what are root causes. Look for what is a byproduct of what is actually happening, and look for what is setting everything into motion, right? That is your root cause. If you practice just these 4 skills alone, you are going to see your practice scores go up. You just need to train yourself into thinking, right? And you just need to have a structure to, recognize these things, and you need to build up the muscle to be able to do it. You have time right now. You can slow down right now. You can, go through all of these questions right now. On the SHRM exam, it is going to be, your time is going to be more precious. But right now you can develop the muscle. You can work on it. And by the time the exam is here, you'll already have this in place, right? So again, work on these 4 things. These are 4, very important tools that you can use. And then also, if you have, I know I have been getting, this is another thing, I've been getting lots of emails about the boot camp. So I hopefully can answer all of these in one time tonight. But if you still have more like specific questions, then I will try to answer those as well. But hopefully I can answer all of these questions tonight about the boot camp. So in the boot camp, we do 30 minutes of lessons for 30 days. In that 30 minutes, I will deliver like a short focus lesson about a skill, and then one about content. Then we have, practice questions. This is what reinforces the testing skill that we learn. There's a weekly Q&A or a game night, depending on what you need for that night. So you can test your thinking that way. We have practice. We have a practice quiz for every section. And then we have one big exam at the end. And then we also have, on the last day, we also have a past test taker come in, answer your questions, like questions about the exam itself, about the experience and all that. And of course, we have like a community group and all that. But the insight from the last test taker, I think that's really, really valuable. So you'll have the opportunity to ask her like specific questions about her test, what was on it, her study method. She passed in the last window. So it's still kind of fresh in her mind. That's why I got her in. She was diligent, right? So, but the goal by the end of that 30 days is you will have strategies to think like SHRM. I also want to tell you that the boot camp is not for people who have 2-3 months to take the exam. The boot camp is for people who are 30 days or less from their exam, and they are still not confident, still don't know what they're doing, haven't even started studying. Because if you have 2-3 months, you can use regular study, right? And you don't have to take a boot camp, because the boot camp is like, I'm throwing everything at the wall. This is my last ditch effort, right? It is going to give you the strategies that you can walk into test day and have a fighting chance to pass the exam. If you use these strategies and you understand the key concepts that I am going to introduce to you in the short 30 days, then you at least have a fighting chance to pass the exam. Because like I said, this exam is not really about, it's not about just memorizing a whole bunch of content. It's about the concepts. So if you have just 30 days, the boot camp is a good chance of, I can still do this, right? Even though I started late, or even though I'm still behind, or even though I don't feel confident, I can still do this. And it's focused, and it's, intense, and you have to work every day. So that's why it's not like 4 if you have 2 or 3 months, because this is something that you have to commit to, right? You have to be willing to give 30 minutes every single day, Saturdays and Sundays included. And you have to commit to following my lead and, being accountable and showing accountability and making sure that you are there every day. I am going to be, like I am nudging you every day. I am like, you have to be okay with my micromanagement of you, right? Because you just have 30 minutes. So that is all that I have. Oh, and the boot camp
Angela.
is, yes.
Oh, I was going to ask you a question. If you have pre-recorded boot camp, because my test is on January the 5th, and your boot camp starts on the 2nd, and I really want to do it, but I don't know if there's enough time.
There is not enough time. Boot
Yeah.
camp is 30 days, and you need all 30 days. Like I said, this is your last ditch effort. Here. So and there's
What's your cramp session? Is that something that could possibly be an option?
Yeah, if you haven't taken the cram session, that could be a great option.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
7.5 hours long. Now, it's not strategy focused, it's content focused. But if you do like a cram session, like I'll be honest, if I would just go for the cram session and the situational judgment workshop if you just have this much time.
Okay.
Just,
Okay, yes.
If you have an option between the boot camp and the cramp session, you have time for both. Which one will you choose?
if you have time for both,
Yes.
I mean, it really depends on. I want to reiterate, the boot camp is like you are in the throes of desperation, right? If you have time and you have been studying, then the natural lead is the cram session, right? Because you already have strategy, you've already been studying, you already know the content. This boot camp is for people who absolutely are in desperation. Like, I'm about to test in 30 days. I haven't started studying. I'm about to test in 30 or less days, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I am I'm failing practice quizzes left and right. I do not understand any of this information, and you need something intense. But if you have time and you have been studying, then you don't need the boot camp. But the boot camp, is again for desperation. But the boot camp is $350. And I know, and because I have to manage it a lot, and manage the participants a lot, I cannot allow a lot of people in the boot camp. And this is why I know a lot of you have asked me, why is it only open to sign up for 6 hours? And that's because I really have to try to manage the number of people that get into the boot camp, because I'm going to have to be monitoring a lot.
And in terms of the cram, when's the next one? My test date is December 20th.
Oh, we had the cram the week before. I think we had it already. I think it was on the 3rd or the 30th. Yeah, so.
And there won't be another one before the 20th?
No.
Okay.
How do we sign up for the boot camp for January 2nd?
The sign up is going to be open on January 2nd. It's going to be open for 6 hours to sign up again.
Okay.
Because it's kind of just kind of first come, first serve, because.
So Angela, what if your site breaks down because we're all trying to get on there?
Oh my gosh, I am praying that doesn't happen. But if that does happen, then that has not happened before. If it does happen, send me an email. I'm going to be on my email because I know it's kind of going to probably be a little frenzy. I'm going to be on my email monitoring. If somebody just send me, I can add you really quick like that.
So now, are you saying it opens January 2nd? Would that be at midnight? Do I need to stay up at midnight and then boom, click? Or are you saying that 7 a.m. Central Time or Eastern Standard Time or Pacific Time? What is January 2nd mean? What does that mean?
Yep, it opens January 2nd from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and boot camp
Ni-
starts at 5 p.m. and that's Central Time.
9 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's
Yep.
the sign up
9
to take
a.m.
it
to 3 p.m. or until the slots fill. Because
until
we
the
only
slots
have
fill.
50. There are only 50 slots.
There are only 50 slots.
Could you give us the link to it?
You gotta go
Have you
to
joined the boot camp wait list?
You gotta go to the
No, I
wait
have
list.
not.
Okay. You send an email and she'll send you the wait list link.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Angela, for the cram
Okay,
though, we can purchase the video, correct, of the one that you just did?
Yes, the recording.
It's just
is-
not live.
right.
Oh, perfect. That's what I was going to ask. Thank you,
Okay,
Angela.
absolutely.
What is the price of the cram session?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.